That night seemed ordinary for everyone, except for her. Elisa walked quickly along the brightly lit sidewalk, trying to steady the anxiety pounding in her chest. The plain black dress, borrowed from the event agency, only highlighted the distance between her and the guests arriving at the mansion. Women shimmered in sparkling gowns, men straightened their expensive suits, and Elisa clutched the small bag where she kept the temporary badge that granted her access to work. It wasn't her first time working as a waitress, but it was the first in such a luxurious setting. The mansion's iron gates looked like something out of another world, glistening under the entrance lights while imported cars pulled up one after another to drop off the guests. She took a deep breath. "It's just a job, just another night," she whispered to herself, repeating it like a mantra to calm her nerves. But the truth was, nothing about this place belonged to her. Elisa was a young woman from humble beginnings, a graphic designer by training, forced into odd jobs ever since life decided to test her limits. Her mother was sick, the medication was expensive, rent was months behind, and the little freelance work from her design studio no longer brought in enough to cover even the basics. Inside the mansion, the difference was overwhelming. Crystal chandeliers sparkled above a ballroom filled with laughter, clinking glasses, and conversations about investments, yachts, and international vacations. Elisa entered with a tray in her hands, her steps careful, her smile practiced. To the guests, she wasn't a person. She was part of the decor, like the velvet curtains or the floral arrangements. And strangely, being invisible was a relief. Still, she couldn't shake off the weight pressing on her chest. Every glass of champagne she served, every polished shoe brushing past her, reminded her of how far she was from this world. While they discussed which European country to visit next, she silently calculated how many more shifts she would need to buy her mother's medicine. While they bragged about stock market gains, she thought about whether she could keep the electricity on at home. She balanced the tray, biting back a sigh. "I don't belong here," she thought. But then she remembered what she had told her friend, the one who got her this job. "I'm not here to belong. I'm here to survive." Every step felt heavier, not because of the tray, but because of the burden inside her. A life stuck in place, trapped in a cycle that never seemed to end. As she moved through the crowd, one thought crossed her mind. Maybe she could find a quiet corner, just for a moment, to breathe, to remind herself that this night, like every hardship, would eventually pass. What Elisa didn't know was that before dawn, her life would change forever, and it would all begin with a single wrong turn, one mistake that would lead her straight into the path of someone powerful enough to change everything she thought she knew about her world and herself. Elisa adjusted the tray in her hands, weaving carefully through the glittering crowd. Every corner of the ballroom looked like it had been designed to intimidate. Crystal chandeliers dangling like frozen waterfalls, marble floors so polished they reflected the guests' silhouettes, and golden curtains framing windows that stretched nearly to the ceiling. To the people sipping champagne and exchanging knowing laughs, this was normal. For Elisa, it was like stepping onto another planet. She tried to focus on the job, move forward, offer drinks, keep smiling, but her eyes couldn't help wandering. Everywhere she looked, there was excess. A woman in a sequined gown boasted about her villa in Italy. A man bragged about buying stocks just for fun, his Rolex flashing under the lights as he lifted his glass. Others compared cars, beaches, and private chefs as if they were discussing grocery lists. The more Elisa listened, the smaller she felt. To them, money wasn't survival. It was just a game. For her, every coin mattered. She thought of her mother at home, counting out pills and stretching meals, and a wave of frustration burned in her chest. Her cousin Daniel, also working the event, brushed past with a tray of appetizers. "Just a couple more hours," he whispered, giving her an encouraging nod. Elisa forced a smile, but her heart wasn't in it. "Hours?" she muttered under her breath. "Feels like a lifetime." Still, she pressed on. Some guests barely looked at her as they snatched glasses from her tray. Others looked straight through her, like she was nothing more than furniture. At first it stung, but after a while she decided being invisible wasn't so bad. Invisibility meant survival. Yet even in that sea of strangers, she couldn't ignore the feeling of being watched. Her eyes scanned the room, but the host, the man everyone whispered about, the billionaire behind all this extravagance, was nowhere to be seen. She had heard rumors that he
rarely showed up to his own parties. That struck her as odd. Why spend so much to impress people if you didn't even care to be present? Her thoughts were interrupted by a sharp pang in her back. She had been carrying the heavy tray for too long without rest. Elisa shifted her weight, her arms trembling slightly. Maybe it was time to slip away for just a moment, to find a bathroom or a quiet corner where she could breathe. Daniel circled back, catching the look on her face. "Need a break?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, just a quick one. Can you cover me?" "Of course. Third door down the hallway," he replied, smoothly lifting the tray from her hands. Relieved, Elisa stepped away from the crowd. The further she moved from the laughter and clinking glasses, the more she felt her shoulders loosen. The hallway was dimly lit, lined with abstract paintings and silent as a church. For the first time that evening, she felt like she could breathe again. But little did Elisa know, that search for a moment of peace was about to take her deeper into a part of the mansion no guest or staff was ever meant to see. The moment Elisa stepped out of the crowded ballroom, the noise faded like someone had turned down the volume on life itself. The hallway stretched long and quiet, with soft recessed lights glowing along the walls. It was almost too perfect, like walking through a gallery. Abstract paintings hung in expensive frames, each one probably worth more than she made in a year. She counted the doors. 1, 2, 3. Daniel had said the bathroom was the third door on the right, but when she reached it, her stomach sunk. Instead of a bathroom, she found herself at a junction where the hallway split into 3 more corridors. "Great," she muttered, adjusting the strap of her shoes. "Now which one is it?" She hesitated, chewing on her lip. The left hallway looked darker, emptier, but something about the faint glow at the end drew her in. Curiosity won. She stepped carefully, her heels clicking softly against the marble. Each door she passed was sleek, modern, and firmly shut, except for one at the very end. The door was slightly ajar, with a thin line of light spilling into the hallway. Elisa slowed her pace. "Hello?" she whispered, knocking lightly. "Is this the bathroom?" No answer. She pushed the door open a little more and peeked inside. What she saw didn't look like a bathroom at all. The room was stark, minimalist, almost futuristic. A couch sat against one wall, a small table in front of it, and a panel of screens covered the opposite side. The glow of technology hummed softly in the otherwise silent space. Her curiosity overpowered her nerves. She stepped inside. The air felt cooler here, the walls a muted gray with no windows in sight. It didn't take long for the heavy door to swing shut behind her with a thud. Elisa spun around, reaching for the handle. She twisted hard, but the door wouldn't budge. Her pulse quickened. She tried again, jiggling the handle, then shoved her shoulder against it. Nothing. What the? The sound of metal locks clicking into place echoed through the room. Elisa froze. No, 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 no. She banged on the door. "Hello? Someone! The door locked. I'm stuck in here." Her voice was swallowed by silence. She hit harder, panic rising with every unanswered knock. No one could hear her. She screamed, but the room seemed built to mute sound. Her breaths came fast and shallow. She spun around, scanning the space for a way out. The walls were solid, reinforced, like something from a movie. The glowing control panel near the screens blinked faintly, but it required a fingerprint to operate. Her heart raced. "What is this place?" she whispered. In that moment, Elisa realized she hadn't just stumbled into a random room. She had walked into something secret, something she was never meant to see, and now she was trapped, alone with no idea if anyone even knew she was there. What Elisa didn't know yet was that this wasn't just any room, it was a panic room. And the man who owned it, the billionaire host she hadn't seen all night, was about to become the only person who could hear her. Blinked red every time she touched it. Access denied. She slammed her hand against it. "Come on!" Her knees gave out, and she sank to the floor, hugging herself. She had no phone, no way to call for help. The room was windowless, soundproof, built to keep people in, or maybe to keep something out. "What kind of place is this?" she whispered, tears stinging her eyes. Her mind ran wild with possibilities. What if no one even realized she was missing? To the rich guests upstairs, she was invisible, just another nameless waitress. Hours could pass, maybe the whole night, before someone noticed she hadn't returned with her tray. The thought made her chest tighten. She buried her face in her hands, fighting to steady her breathing. "Please," she muttered, "I can't be stuck here." Then, suddenly, a low hum filled the room. Elisa's head shot up. The panel on the wall flickered, and a voice, deep, smooth, steady, poured out of hidden speakers. "You're safe," it said. Elisa scrambled to her feet, eyes darting around the empty room. "Who's there?" "Don't panic," the voice continued, calmly. "I'm coming to you." Her heart pounded harder. The voice was male, controlled, with the kind of authority that didn't need to shout to be obeyed. "Where are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking between fear and relief. A pause. Then, "My name is Damien Cross. This is my home. You've accidentally locked yourself inside one of my rooms." The name hit her like a bolt of lightning. She knew that name. Everyone did. Damien Cross, the billionaire, the man who owned this mansion, who people whispered about in the ballroom, who was rumored to be too busy counting his fortune to even attend his own parties. And now, his voice was in this room with her. Elisa's hands trembled as she hugged herself tighter. "What is this place?" she whispered. Damien's voice softened, but the answer only deepened the mystery. "It's a panic room, and you're not supposed to be in it." Elisa froze, her back pressed against the cold wall, her eyes darting around the room as if the voice could materialize from thin air. Damien Cross. The name pulsed in her mind. She had seen his face on magazine covers, headlines about his empire flashing across television screens. Billionaire, untouchable, a man who lived in a world galaxies away from hers. And now here he was, talking to her. Her throat tightened. "If this is a panic room, why did the door lock behind me?" she demanded, her voice shaking between fear and relief. "That's what panic rooms do," Damien's voice replied, steady as stone. "They lock automatically. Security protocol." Elisa's knees wobbled. "So what? You're saying I'm trapped?" "Not for long," came the answer. "I'm already on my way." For a moment, silence returned, heavy and suffocating. Elisa wrapped herself around herself, pacing the room. Every nerve in her body screamed for escape. Yet something about his voice anchored her, just enough to keep her from breaking completely. Minutes stretched like hours. Then, the click of a lock. Elisa spun toward the door. Slowly, it swung open, and there he was. Damien Cross stepped inside, tall and broad-shouldered, his suit tailored so perfectly it looked sculpted to his frame. His dark hair was neatly styled, his jawline sharp, and his eyes, those startling blue eyes, locked onto hers with an intensity that made her heart skip. He was even more intimidating in person than the glossy photos she had seen. For a moment, Elisa forgot how to breathe. "I'm sorry you had to experience this," Damien said, closing the door behind him with quiet finality. His tone wasn't arrogant as she had expected, but calm, almost gentle. Elisa blinked at him, trying to make sense of it all. "Why do you even have a room like this?" His lips pressed into a faint line. "Because sometimes safety is more valuable than freedom." The cryptic answer only deepened her mystery. Still, her fear softened under the weight of his presence. For reasons she couldn't explain, she felt like she could trust him, even though everything about him screamed power, distance, and danger. "I'll have someone come unlock the system soon, but until then, you're safe here." "Safe," she repeated, almost bitterly. "In a locked box with no windows?" His mouth curved slightly, almost a smile, but not quite. Sometimes being safe feels exactly like being trapped. The way he said it made her chest tighten. She realized there was something behind those words, something personal, something that had nothing to do with her. For a moment, their eyes held. And in that silence, Elisa sensed that this man, this billionaire who had everything, was hiding a loneliness not so different from her own.
untouchable, arrogant, cold. But there was something in his eyes, quiet, piercing, almost human, that made her hesitate. He walked further into the room, his movements measured, controlled. Instead of towering over her, he lowered his voice. "You don't have to be afraid. No one can hurt you here." She let out a shaky laugh, folding her arms. "Funny, I've never felt more trapped in my life." Damien's gaze lingered on her, and for a brief moment, his expression softened. Trapped doesn't always mean unsafe. Those words unsettled her. He was speaking about more than just the room. She could feel it. Before she could ask, he motioned toward a small built-in refrigerator, pulling out 2 bottles of water. He held one out to her. "Here, you look like you could use this." Her fingers brushed his as she took it, and she hated how her pulse jumped at the brief contact. "Thanks," she muttered, twisting the cap. They sat across from each other, silence thick in the air. Finally, Damien spoke. "How did you end up here?" Elisa hesitated, embarrassed to admit the truth. "I was looking for the bathroom. Took a wrong turn." She shrugged lightly. "Guess I don't exactly belong in places like this." Something flickered in his eyes. "Why not?" She let out a humorless laugh. "Because this isn't my world. I design logos for small businesses, scrape together rent when I can, and pray my mom's medication doesn't go up in price. That's my reality. This," she gestured at the walls, "this is just survival money. One night of carrying trays so we can keep the lights on at home." Damien didn't smile. He didn't look amused by her sarcasm. Instead, he leaned back, studying her as if she had just revealed something rare. "Life has a strange way of forcing paths to cross," he said quietly. For the first time, Elisa saw something shift in him. The billionaire mask slipped just a little, and she caught a glimpse of the man underneath, a man who seemed just as trapped by his world as she felt by hers. Their eyes locked. It was only a moment, but it felt heavier than the room itself, like 2 strangers recognizing something familiar in each other. Elisa broke eye contact first, sipping her water to hide the flush in her cheeks. "Well, this is officially the weirdest night of my life." Damien's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Mine too." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Elisa twisted the cap of the water bottle in her hands, stealing quick glances at Damien. There was something unsettling about being this close to him, this man who had everything money could buy, yet looked as if he carried a weight heavier than gold. Finally, she broke the silence. "So tell me, Mr. Cross, what's it like being you? Waking up in a palace, having people jump at your every word, never worrying about bills." Damien chuckled softly, but the sound wasn't joyful, it was hollow. "You think that's what it means to be me? That money makes life easier?" His eyes darkened, his tone quieter now. "Money builds walls. It keeps people close for the wrong reasons and pushes away the ones who matter." Elisa frowned, surprised by the honesty in his words. "Walls? From where I'm standing, looks more like freedom." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Freedom?" His voice sharpened. "Do you know what it's like to wonder every single day if the people around you care about you, or just your bank account? Do you know what it's like to live surrounded by hundreds of faces but never feel seen?" The intensity in his eyes silenced her. She hugged her knees tighter, realizing that behind the flawless suit and the polished smile was a man as lonely as she had ever been. After a pause, Damien's tone softened. "My father died when I was 17. Overnight, the empire was mine. Everyone said I was lucky, but all I felt was trapped. Trapped by expectations, by responsibilities, by a life I never chose." Elisa's chest tightened. She thought of her own father, killed by a drunk driver when she was 15, leaving her and her mother to struggle alone. For a moment, their worlds, so different on the outside, felt painfully similar on the inside. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. Damien gave a faint nod. "And you? What's your story, Elisa?" She hesitated, then sighed. "My dad died too, and since then it's just been me and my mom. She's sick now, but she still works 2 jobs when she can. I try to help with what I earn from design work, but it's never enough. That's why I'm here, carrying trays in rooms where I don't belong." Her voice cracked at the end, but she quickly turned away, not wanting to see her vulnerability. To her surprise, Damien didn't respond with pity. Instead, his voice was steady, almost respectful. "You belong more than you think, not because of the dress or the job or this house, but because you're here, and that's enough." Their eyes met again, and something passed between them, something wordless but real. In that
Locked room, surrounded by steel and silence, 2 people who never should have met were beginning to see each other for who they truly were. The silence between them stretched, but it was no longer uncomfortable. It felt charged, like the air before a storm. Elisa's fingers toyed with the plastic cap of her water bottle, while Damien leaned back in his chair, his sharp blue eyes still studying her as if she were a puzzle he couldn't quite solve. "You know," he said at last, his tone measured, "most people I meet talk endlessly about themselves. You actually listen. That's rare." Elisa raised an eyebrow. "I don't think you're exactly short on people lining up to flatter you, Mr. Cross." "Damien," he corrected gently. "And flattery is useless. I don't need more yes men. What I need is honesty, perspective, someone willing to tell me when I'm wrong." Her lips curved in a faint, ironic smile. "Careful what you wish for. I've been told I have a bad habit of saying what I think." He didn't flinch. In fact, the corner of his mouth twitched into the ghost of a smile. "Good. That's exactly what I want." Elisa blinked, unsure if she'd heard correctly. "Want? For what?" Damien leaned forward, his voice lowering. "I'm launching a new division of my company, security systems, not just for the wealthy, but for everyday people. Affordable, accessible. I want to change the perception that safety is a luxury." Her breath caught. "And what does that have to do with me?" "You're a designer," he said simply. "I've seen your work. Small businesses, clean branding, logos that tell stories. That's what I need for this project. Authenticity. A design that speaks to real people, not just billionaires in glass towers." Elisa's head spun. "Wait, how do you even know about my work?" His eyes softened. "I did my homework. I don't make offers lightly." For a moment, she could only stare at him. This couldn't be real. She was just a struggling waitress for the night, sitting in a panic room with a man who could buy her entire building without noticing. And now he was offering her something more valuable than money, a chance. She shook her head, almost laughing. "You're insane. You don't even know me." "I know enough," Damien said firmly. "I know talent when I see it, and I know strength when it walks into my house by accident and still manages to hold its head high." Her chest tightened. No one had ever spoken to her like that before. "I can't," she started, but her voice trailed off. "You can," he interrupted, his tone calm but commanding. "You just have to decide if you want to." Elisa's throat ached with the weight of the decision. She thought of her mother, of the unpaid bills, of the feeling of being invisible at every job she took just to survive. And then she looked at Damien, this man who, against all odds, was offering her a way to finally step out of survival mode and into something more. For the first time that night, hope flickered in her chest. Elisa could hardly believe the words that had just come out of Damien's mouth. A billionaire offering her, a waitress for the night, a struggling desire, a real opportunity? It felt surreal, like she'd stumbled into someone else's story. But the reality of it hit the next morning when Damien's assistant sent her an email with official documents, a contract, a project outline,
meeting schedules. Her name printed at the top of papers that looked far too important for someone like her. She stared at the screen for almost an hour before whispering to herself, "This can't be real." Yet it was. And with it came the weight of expectation. The first meeting wasn't with Damien alone. It was with his entire executive team. Elisa walked into the sleek, glass-walled boardroom feeling like an imposter in borrowed clothes. Executives in tailored suits eyed her curiously, some with polite smiles, others with veiled skepticism. Damien, seated at the head of the table, gave her a reassuring nod. That single gesture kept her knees from buckling. She presented her designs with trembling hands, but a steady voice. She spoke about simplicity, accessibility, trust, things that mattered to ordinary people, like her mother, like the neighbors in her Brooklyn apartment. She expected them to dismiss her, maybe even laugh. But to her shock, several of them leaned forward, nodding in approval. One even whispered, "She gets it." Still, not everyone was convinced. A sharp-eyed executive cleared his throat. "She's inexperienced. Are we really entrusting a billion-dollar division to someone who's never worked on this scale?" The words stung, but before Elisa could respond, Damien spoke firmly. "We're not entrusting it to her. We're partnering with her. There's a difference." The room fell silent. For the first time, Elisa realized he wasn't just giving her a job, he was backing her, publicly, without hesitation. But outside the boardroom, things weren't so easy. Whispers followed her in the hallways. Assistants
Exchanged glances when she passed. Some saw her as lucky, others as undeserving. And then there was Victoria, Damien's elegant, sharp-tongued ex, who made it clear with every cold smile that Elisa didn't belong in Damien's world. One evening, after another draining day, Elisa nearly broke down. Sitting in the back of the car Damien had sent for her, she whispered, "I don't fit here. I'm just waiting for the moment they push me out." Damien, seated beside her, turned his head. "Do you think I fit here?" She frowned. "What do you mean? This is your world." "No," he said quietly. "This is my prison. You're the only one who makes it feel less empty." The sincerity in his voice caught her off guard. She looked at him, and for a fleeting second all the doubts melted away. There was no billionaire, no waitress, no power imbalance, just two people, scarred in different ways, learning to breathe easier in each other's presence. And for the first time, Elisa began to wonder if, maybe, just maybe, this was more than an opportunity. Maybe it was the start of something neither of them had expected. The weeks that followed felt like a whirlwind Elisa could barely keep up with. Designs, presentations, late-night brainstorming sessions, her life had shifted overnight. No longer was she just the invisible girl carrying trays in someone else's mansion. She had a voice now, a place, a purpose. But with that came a decision she couldn't ignore. Was this just a job? Or was it something more? The whispers hadn't stopped. Some executives still doubted her. Victoria's sharp words echoed in her head, "You'll never belong here." And sometimes, late at night, when the noise of the day faded, Elisa wondered if it was true. One evening, after presenting the final version of the project, she walked out of the boardroom exhausted. Damien caught up to her, his steps confident, his expression unreadable. "You did well," he said simply. Elisa forced a smile. "Thanks, though I'm pretty sure half the room still hates me." "Let them," Damien replied without hesitation. "They'll get over it, or they won't. Either way, you've proven yourself." They walked in silence until they reached the quiet corner of the building where the city lights spilled through the glass. Damien stopped, turning to face her. His eyes, usually sharp, calculating, held something different tonight. Vulnerability. "Elisa," he said softly, "you walked into my life by accident, but you stayed because you chose to. You've challenged me in ways no one else dared, and I don't want this," he gestured vaguely between them, "to end when the project does." Her heart pounded. "Damien." He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small black box. Her breath caught, but he quickly shook his head.
Not that. Not yet. I'm not asking forever. Not tonight. I'm asking for a beginning. Will you stay? Not as an employee, not as a guest in my world, but as my partner in life. Her throat tightened. She thought of her mother, of the tiny apartment in Brooklyn, of the girl who had walked into that mansion weeks ago just to survive one more day. And then she thought of now, of the woman who had found strength in herself and love in the most unexpected place. Tears welled in her eyes as she whispered, "Yes, I'll stay." Damien let out breath he didn't realize he was holding, a rare, genuine smile breaking across his face. He slipped a simple band onto her finger, not diamonds, not gold, just a symbol, a promise. As the city lights glimmered below and the night wrapped around them, Elisa realized something. The panic room that had once trapped her hadn't been a prison at all. It had been the doorway to a new life, a life she never imagined she could have. And with Damien by her side, she wasn't just surviving anymore. She was finally living.